This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we are continuing with spiritual realm, which is chapter 5 of part 1, in the middle of what he labels as paragraph Beth, paragraph 2. Od Misor Biadenu. We also have the following teaching. Sha'al kol etzem v'chol makre shebenimtzeim hashfalim ha'elu hufkedu pekidim min asug ha'malachi shezacharnu lemala. We have this teaching that everything physical that exists in this world has its spiritual root. It has its angel, its malach, its spiritual entity that is in charge of it, that oversees it. The Gemara puts it that there is not a single blade of grass that does not have its malach, its angel. A malach, of course, means messenger, its spiritual agent, which tells it to grow. And their charge, their mission is to maintain this part of the physical world, or this mikra, or this occurrence that takes place. Benimsot hashvalim, down here in the lower physical realm, kafi mashuhu ulechadesh mashvei litchadesh, either to maintain it as it needs to be, or to bring about any chidush, any renewal, any change in it, all kafi agzeira yonah, or all according to the decree from above. So everything that exists here in the physical world has its spiritual entity, its spiritual root, that spiritual force, power that gives it its existence. Otherwise, if it did not have that root in the spiritual world, it would not exist here. Okay, we're up to now Gimel.
Rabbi,
Yes, David.
Would that apply to inanimate objects, a rock, for example?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Each and everything, right? The Gemara speaks about a blade of grass, but the same thing would also apply, right? It spoke about a blade of grass because there it says it has a malach that tells it to grow, right? The rock isn't growing, but anything has to have its source over there. V'amnam, ika mitziyut ha'olam ha'matzah ha'miti hu b'kochot ha'elyonim. So really, the true existence of anything in this world can be found in those forces, in those roots above. V'toldot masha behem, and the result, the derivation of all of that, hu masha begashmi hashvalim, that is what we find here in this physical world. V'zeh, and that is bein mash mitchilat ubein mash mitchadesh, whether that which was or that which is transforming and coming about as time goes by. V'hainu, meaning, according to those kochot, those forces that were created, and according to the boundaries that they have, that will determine what exists, what winds its way down through these links from these different spiritual worlds to our world. That determines what we have around us. And based on changes that go about up there in the roots and the realms, that is what changes and come about, transformations come about down here below. Achen hamitziyut hamatzav ha'seder v'chol shar v'chanot b'kochot hen kvi ma sheshayach b'hem lefi amitat anyanim. So those forces as they are in the heavens, that is all based on the roles that they are meant to play as they are. V'hamitziyut v'hamatzav ha'seder v'chol shar mikrim b'shvalim, and that which results down here, that's the koach, and this is the actualization down in this world, are all results from above. Except, we'll see now in Dalid, there is one major exception. And that's what causes there to be this two-way traffic. So far, we've spoken about that whatever happens down in this world is working from above, working its way down below to us. Now, Dalit. Anybody have a problem finding the place? Everybody with me in the place? We're all good? Okay, so paragraph number 4 now. V'hinei, lefi shoresh zeh, according to this idea, this principle, this foundation, tchilat kol havayot, the start of anything that exists, it emanates lamala, starting from above, b'kochot elyonim, for these upper forces, v'sofam, and they work their way down, lamata bashvalim, down below, amongst us this lower realm. And all changes start, transformation starts above and comes down. Amnam, however, prat echad yesh sheyotze min haklal hazeh. There is one aspect that is an exception to this otherwise ironclad rule. And that is that which is dependent upon the free will choices that human beings make. As we discussed earlier, the very purpose of creation is that there will be this free-willed being known as humankind, who has the ability to choose that which the person wants to choose, whether it is min hatov, from good, or min hara, or from bad. Hinei asau bilti talui zeb bezeh bezulato. So therefore, when it comes to that realm, when it comes to those decisions, mankind must be completely independent, not subject to these forces of above that are directing that which happens down below. When it comes to our free will, we cannot be talui bizulato. We cannot be dependent on anything else besides ourselves. As we learned before, we must be the ba'alim. We must be the owners. And we must take, and we do take full responsibility. And we only take full responsibility because we are not dependent on any other thing besides ourselves when it comes to our free will decisions. V'adraba, on the contrary, Natan lo koach liot mania la'olam atzmo. On the contrary, we are given this power, this ability, that we can then influence, affect the world and the other creations, kafi ma sheyivchar b'cheftzo, based upon that which we choose, the decisions that we make. V'nimsa ba'olam shtei tnuot, and therefore there are these two motions, this two-directional flow, klaliot hafchiot, and they are the opposite, one the opposite of the other. Ha'achat, one of them is tiv'it, that is that which is the natural. Muchrachat, which comes down as it comes down, and we do not affect or control that in any way. V'hashniya, but the second one is bichiriyit. It is our bichira. It is our choices. Ha'achat, the first one is milamala lamata. It works its way from above down below into our world. V'hashniya milmata lamala. Whereas the bechira works its way from down in this world up into the spiritual realm. And then, as we mentioned last time, we'll soon see, it's then going to rebound. Once it affects the spiritual realm, then the spiritual realm always affects what's happening down here in the physical world. I compared it last week. In a gym, you often have a rope that is attached to the ceiling. Now, a person, if someone is up high, they shake it at the top, it will work its way down to the bottom of the rope. But if you're at the bottom and you give it a turn, you give it a shake, it'll work its way up, and then it will work its way right back down. And that's what we're talking about over here. Hamuchrachat, that which is set, that which is not our actions, not dependent upon our choices. That's the influence, the effect, the movement of the shvalim, of that down here in the physical world, from the forces above. That is going from above down below. Habichiriyit, but that which is our free will. That is what mankind moves, shakes, affects, influences through our bechira, through our free will. V'hinei mashu menia, efshar sheyeh ela geshem min hagashmiim. Our effect is on our choices, is on the physical things. That's the realm wherein we act. Ki adam gashmi. We are physical beings. We have a neshama, a soul, but that soul resides and only acts through our physical being. Umasav gashmiim. And our actions are physical actions, tangible, physical actions. That's why, as we mentioned many times, the mitzvot, Judaism is not about going onto a mountaintop and meditating. It's rolling up our sleeves and getting involved in the world. That is not preshut, not separating ourselves from the world, but kedusha. Kedusha is sanctifying, is taking the physical and bringing it up. That's the blessing we make every time we do a mitzvah with a bracha. Whenever we say a bracha of a mitzvah, the bracha is Asher Kiddishanu, that you sanctify us, that we are transformed. The physical is transformed through the mitzvot. So therefore, our effect is on this Gashmi physical world. Ki Adam Gashmi, because a human being is Gashmi, is physical. L'masav Gashmiim, and our actions are physical. Aval lipnei hakesher, but because of those links in the chain, that connection by hitzarfut, and the connections that exist, hanimsa, which are found bein hakachot elyonim v'agashmiim, between the physical and the spiritual. For those who just joined, let me put the on the chat again. Give me 1 second. I apologize. Okay. For those who joined, that's the link in the chat of where you'll find the text. And we're finishing up paragraph 4, towards the end of paragraph 4. Ki Adam Gashmi, because mankind is physical and our actions are physical. But because of that connection, HaKeshev HaHitztarfut, the tziruf, the coming together, the connection that exists between HaKochot Elyonim, the spiritual forces above, so to speak, V'Agashmiyim, and the physical world that we are in, Hine, behold, Bitnonei HaGashmi, when there is movement down below based on our free will actions, decisions, we'll soon see, Yagia b'emshech et palut el hakoach elyon shalav. That will then affect the spiritual force that is above that. This action is itaruta dilatat, that's referred to. This is movement from down below. Hefech, the opposite of hatzviyat hamuchrachat shezacharnu, opposite of that which normally flows down from above to us. V'ulam tzarich sheteidah, and this is now that double whammy of the rope going up and then coming down. We need to know ki gam adam atzmo ein kol ma'asav b'chiriyim. even a human being, not all of our actions are free-willed. Meaning, not everything is based upon our free will. We find ourselves in certain situations at times that is not based on our free will. Some of our situations are as a result of decisions that we have made. And there are others that are based on the decree from above, whether it might be in order to make things easier for us or to make things more difficult for us. Certainly we had no free will in who our parents were and in the way they decided to bring us up. Now, we might have acted a certain way, which might have spurred certain reactions from them. But it's a constant interplay between our free, that which comes down to us, and our free will. That which is flowing down to us based on this decree of God's wisdom, that is like everything else in the world. Shetnuatam milamata lamala, milamata lamata. It flows from above down to us. Based on these spiritual forces above. And that which is as a result of our bechira, our free will. There the flow goes from down below, up above, as we have explained. You know, it's interesting. We have our tzitzit. And the tzitzit is a double strand, right? And as we say in the Shema, that from the tzitzit we remember all the mitzvot. So that double strand can be viewed as, it looks like it's coming from above down below, and it's also winding up from below up above. And that represents that which comes down, and our mitzvot, which sends things back up. That constant interplay of that which is coming down from the spiritual realm into our world, and the effect that we have by the choices we make, that thereby then affects the status, the state, so to speak, of that spiritual world, which of course then works its way down and affects the world in which we live. Paragraph 5. Hey. B'nei sider ha'adon baruch hu. God arranged. Shekol anyanim asher tipol behem b'chirato shel adam. All matters that fall within the realm of a person's free will. Yagiu lahaniya b'tnot b'chirot et ha'kochot hahem. That we then affect, have that ripple effect, the links of the chain up to those forces. What is the degree of effect that we have? Whatever degree parameters God has set. Certain mitzvot might have a certain effect. If it's done a certain way, it might have a certain effect. More than others. If they're done, right? Each mitzvah has its effect. The degree, the involvement, the focus, the hitlavut, the excitement, the energy, the love that we bring to the mitzvah will also certainly affect the effect that it has up above. V'hainu. Let's take it a step further now. Kilo ma'asav levadam yiniyum. It's not just our actions which have this effect. Elafilu diburo. Our words have an effect. Vafilu machashavto. Even our thoughts have an effect. Ach shi'ur ha'tnua madrigusa lo yela va'oso ha'gvul shegazra v'digbila ha'chachma ha'alyona. The amount of effect, that is something that was set by the boundaries that God has set for it. So that we do not control. But, like he said, our actions, Our words and even our thoughts have an effect. The Chavetz Chaim has a very beautiful teaching. The Chavetz Chaim lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he said that all of the technological advances that humankind is making, we use all of that to help us in our emunah, in our faith, in understanding many of the teachings that seem to be outlandish. And examples he gave was that there's a medrash that by Har Sinai, this week's Torah reading, that by Mount Sinai, everyone heard it as if they were hearing it by themselves. Now, the world could not understand, what does that mean? Until the Chavetz Chaim said people had transistor radios. And then it's beamed out there, but everyone picks it up with their radio, and then they hear what is being said. And we go further and further, and we have, there's a teaching in Pirkei Avot that all of a person's words are all being written down. And people used to think, what type of library can possibly contain all the words of all of mankind, right? And now in our computer world, we say, oh, a thumb drive that can easily hold every single word that I've ever said in my life and anyone I know has ever said in their life, easily be held on a thumb drive. And here we're talking about how a person's thoughts have an effect. And science now, for people who are paralyzed, their brain is sending out the messages, but the nervous system has been damaged to the point that it's not reaching the muscles, and thereby the person who's paralyzed is unable to react. But now they're able to pick up with sensors what a person is thinking and relay that to the muscles. And people now with thought, people who are paralyzed just by having certain thoughts, I want to move my right arm up, they're able to move their right arm because their thoughts are there. The thoughts are there, they're tangible, they have a reality, but the connections are not functioning to their body. But now scientists are finding ways to transmit that thought to the muscle, not through the nervous system, however they transmit it, and be able to move. Science is opening up our eyes to all of these teachings. Our thoughts have a reality, not just our free will actions, not just our words, but even our thoughts resonate and work their way up into that spiritual realm. V'amnam, paragraph 6. This is working its way up and then working its way down. After that movement, that influence of our bechira, of our free will choice, that's going to then elicit a movement from above, one of those natural, forced, non-free will actions. Once we have moved and affected them, so their state always affects that which is under their domain. So they're constantly affecting, those are the spiritual roots of all that which exists. When they're changed, what's happening down here changes. If our actions affect those roots, then that in turn affects what's happening in the world over here. That which is under their aegis, under their domain, will then be affected. How it works, the degree that it works, the parameters, they are incredibly detailed. Based on God's decree, his wisdom. With the depth of his guidance. Whatever whatever is best for this physical world. And there are many, many different limits, amounts. Whether in the effect that we have up above, and the rebound effect that it then has down over here. Based on all of this is predicated all of the events, actions, movements that happen in this world, and God's supervising, God's guidance of all this, when all that was and all that will be. So everything is this combination of gezerah, decree, and bechira, and free will. Decree, free will. But our free will affects that which is above, which then affects the gezerah, the decree of that which works its way down here. Vihine, and behold, paragraph 7. Bioto shegazra chachmato yitbarach, being that God's wisdom decreed, as we said much earlier, there must exist in this world tov and ra, good and evil, in order for there to be true choice, true free will, and in order for us to be the ba'alim, the owners, who have rightfully gained the ownership of our actions, it needs to be a real decision that needs to be made. So there must exist in this world both tov, good, and ra, and evil. Hine, if that what exists down here, then guess what? It must exist up above, because anything that is down here has its roots up above. This, the root of this, the start of this must be in the roots, in the spiritual roots above. And only from that works its way down. Hadavar, the matter of Tov and Ra, works its way down to Bashvalim, to this lower world where we are at. And these forces above are arranged that they can either have tikkun, fixed, rectification, that it is running properly, it's humming along, or kilkul. Kilkul is damage when things are broken. Kilkul, things are not functioning smoothly. V'hainu, shimatzei bahem matzav tov v'lo tov. They will have a state of tov and a state of lo tov. In a state of tov, we have beautiful things coming down into this world. In a state of lo tov, kilkul, we've got kilkul. We've got pain, destruction coming down to this world. V'amitat tuva matzav yiyeh, shieh b'achana le'or b'or panav yitbarach v'ye'ir lehem. We say in our Amidah, Ki be'or panecha natata lanu, Hashem, if from the light of your countenance, so to speak, you've given us. And we've mentioned before over here, that when it is in its proper state, it means it's being illuminated by the or panav yitbarach. God's presence is close, is lighting it up, is illuminating it. That's what brings it to this proper, well-functioning state. V'hafcho, and the opposite, shetachsar mehem achana azot, when it's lacking this proper state, v'yit aleim mehem, that is when this light of God's presence, so to speak, is being withheld from them. V'toldo tikunam shvalim hu atov bahem v'hefech v'hefech. And that which then will work its way down when those forces are being illuminated by the light of God, so to speak, then what works its way down here is tov. And when it's the opposite, what works its way down here is the opposite. Yitzorech sheteidah, but we need to know. Ki hinei af al pi shebe'emet sibat kol inyanei hatov b'chol makom shehem. Even though, in fact, the source of all that which is good, wherever, in whichever stage it is, perish, meaning bein b'kochot, whether it's up in the spiritual realm, in the sources, in the roots, bein b'toldotehem, whether it has worked its way down into this world, the source of that is hinehi ha'arat panav yivarach k'mo shezacharnu. That is the illumination of God, like we have mentioned. The sibat hara, and the root, the source of anything that is ra, b'chol makom shehu, in every place, whether it's up above or down below, is helem ha'arato. It is the concealment of God's illumination. However, amnam, litov, for the good, yitoar ha'adon baruch hu, b'shem siba mamish. When it comes to the good, we say God is the direct cause of the good. He affects that good. Siba mamash. He is truly the direct cause. L'chalav l'pratav, for the generalities and for all the details. Aval l'ra, when it comes to the ra, to the bad, the evil, lo nitareyu, we will not describe him as siba mamash, as a direct cause. Ki amnam, because in fact, we have a teaching, ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu miyached shemo al hara'ah. God does not designate his name on Ra. Ella, rather, what is the cause? The cause is God's removing himself, God's stepping back. Ella ha'elam oro. It is the concealment of his illumination. V'haster panav, and the hiddenness, the concealment of his face. Yechashev l'shoresh lo. That is considered the shoresh, the root of that ra. Ki zeh sibato b'met zeh al tzad heder hatov. As a result of the lack in our world, right? The sun is what warms us up. When the sun is obscured, clouds, so then the heat doesn't make its way through. So the cold that we feel is as a result of the concealment of that heat source. So the sun gives the heat. And when the sun is concealed, then we don't feel that heat. Hashem is the Tov. Hashem is the Hara, is the illumination and the source of all that is Tov. And when he is concealed, hidden, when our actions cause a distancing of God, so to speak, and a concealment, so then the result is the Ra. Outside heder hatov. Once that illumination and that tov is no longer pulsating through, the result is that ra. Aval liprate inyanov mitziutam. Hinei adon baruch hu shekoyachol ve'ein li'chalto miniya v'lo gvul klal. Bara shoresh u'makor prati. But when it comes to the details in Yanov Mitziutam as it works its way through, God is Kol Yachol. There's no limitation on God's ability. There's nothing holding him back. Below Gvul Klal, there are no boundaries whatsoever. Bara Shoresh Makor Prati, Mechuvan bo atachlit hazeh shel otzad pratei inyanei hara. But he created this source, which is designated for this purpose of Ra to come about. When Ra is what the world actually needs, when our actions need to bring about this Ra, this repercussion, in order to maintain the balance, in order to give us the chance to remedy. So God created this apparatus, if we can call it that, through which the Ra comes about. Through his concealment, the Ra comes about. According to that which God's wisdom assessed and arranged is needed for the proper state of mankind and the world. So God, and this is what the pasuk says, and Esther, this is the question that you had brought up. Was it in this class that you brought it up, or is it in a different class? I don't remember, Esther. But you had brought up this pasuk in Yisroel, Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Was it this class, Esther, or a different class?
I think it was a different one.
Different class. Yotzer or, God Yotzer forms or, light. Uborei choshech, and creates darkness. Oseh shalom, he makes peace. Or really, shalom comes from shalem, which is completion. Uborei ra. Now we say, and he creates ra. He creates evil. And we actually say this pasuk as part of our morning shacharit davening. It's the very first blessing that we say of the two blessings before the Shema. And there we alter the word of the prophets into saying, Uborei et hakol, that God creates everything. But the pasuk actually reads, Uborei ra, he creates ra. And it's very, very telling. So he's explaining this to mean that he creates this apparatus, this system, where the concealment of his face will lead to what we term as Ra. And it's very, very interesting because Yotzer or Uvorei Choshech. Yotzer means to form something that's already existing. Borei means to create. So we would have thought it should be the opposite. God creates light, and then by fashioning or obstructing that light, God forms darkness. But in fact, it says the opposite. He forms, adjusts the light, uborei choshech, and creates a new entity known as choshech. And that can be understood, I believe the Nefesh HaChaim explains this in other places, that the world was initially all God's light. It was all atzilut, as it's referred to. It was pure, blinding brilliance of God's presence. And the way our world, the Kabbalists refer to it as a halal, as a place, an empty space, a space where God's light is become filtered. He worked on that light. He works on that light. He forms that light. Yotzer or, until we have a new entity, a new creation, something that never existed before that. What is that? Choshech, darkness, an absence of God's light, which is the ability now for there to exist Ra, which is necessary in order for us to have our bechira, our free will between Tov and Ra, which, as we've been saying all along, as he's been saying all along, is the purpose of creation, that we can choose Tov, but there needs to be a choice. Both need to exist equally. And then we can choose Tov, and thereby merit the ultimate Tov, which is the connection to Hashem. And our bechira, our choice, I had a conversation with one of my, a close friend today, a dear congregant and close friend today, that sometimes our bechira is to choose to accept that which is coming down to us, that gezeirah, whatever it is, whatever limitations, whatever difficulties a person might be encountering, that our bechira, our free will, is to accept that as best as we can. That which we can change, of course, we try to improve. That which we can't, we accept that that is what Hashem is lovingly giving to us based on his wisdom that is often obscured from us. Okay, my friends, good.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That was a mouthful. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
You're
Rabbi.
very, very welcome, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very, very welcome. Good night, everybody. And we'll pick up here next week. And with this, actually, next week we will finish part 1 and move over to Chelek Beth, the second chapter, the second book, I should call it, which is about Hashgacha, which is God's providence, his individualized providence in the world, which is a very, very involved and fascinating topic in the Derech Hashem, in the way of Hashem and our understanding of Hashem in this world. Hello, Uzi.
Yishar koach.
Baruch Tiyah. Good to see you, Uzi.
Thanks.
Okay, my friends.
Bye-bye.
Laila Tov, Laila Tov.
Tov.